Okay. Oh, that's it. You got it. Okay. Uh, uh, okay. Good morning again, everybody, and hope you had a nice holiday. And this is another session on resentment, and we've gotten our way all the way to page 67, page 66, and 67, which I'm going to be looking at in the book. But first, just wanted to go back through a couple of things that I think are important. They've been important for me. At the very beginning of Into Action, chapter 6, it says, we're trying to get a new attitude. We're trying to get a new relationship with our Creator, and we're trying to discover the obstacles in our path. Um, and I think that's a wonderful summary of what we're trying to do um, in this whole process, that we've been told over and over again that we're not going to be able to stay sober on self-reliance, that we're going to have to establish a relationship with our Creator, or higher power, or whatever you want to call it, whatever. Really, to me, it's something that's the opposite of self-reliance. We're told as soon as we get to fear, which will be coming up soon, we're told that the reason that we fear is because of the failure of our self-reliance. That's really quite a statement when you think about it. It's saying the reason I fear is because I don't have anything other than my self-reliance, and my self-reliance keeps giving me bad advice. My self-reliance told me to drink. It told me that life would be better, I would be better, I would be a better person even, I could do a better job at whatever I was doing if I had a drink, that it would help me relax and help me feel better and blah blah blah. But because I've got this allergy that I had no idea about, um, I couldn't just drink one or two or three. I had to drink to where I got stupid, basically. So let me just do one thing here. There we go. Um, it seems to me that there are three big truths that we encounter as we go through this process. The first is a physical truth that I can't take the first drink. Um, the second one is a mental truth that somewhere in this reading on resentment, it's going to say, we don't want to harbor a resentment. We don't want to make it, we don't want to give a resentment a safe place in which to be, because it's only going to lead to futility and unhappiness. And just to the extent that we do this, permit resentment, we're going to be miserable. In the same way that we've got to stay away from the first drink, we got to stay away from this feeling of resentment. Um, and and then we're given in the 10th step, we're given this protocol to handle resentment. So later on, I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but we're going to talk about three treatments when you're feeling resentment. One is doing this 4-column inventory. That's really the topic of today. And when we do a 4-column inventory, we're going to move across from the person we feel resentful toward to understanding that we don't actually resent the person. What we resent is their behavior. And we've put a little thing about resentment, in the second column, column 2. I'm resentful at Jack. He's an arrogant guy. That's column number 2. And then we're moving to this column number 3, where we're given these 7 words that we'll be talking about later to consider, what part of what I think of as me is hurt or threatened when Jack behaves in an arrogant fashion. And then, as you'll see, we move into the 4th column eventually, where they're called the turnarounds. We're looking at, where am I being selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? And we're going to go on from there. And I'll say more about that. But that's our way of handling resentment from an inventory standpoint. Another treatment that we're given is to throw ourselves all the harder into service. And another treatment that we're given is to pray for the person that we're resenting. And we haven't talked about that yet, really. We'll be going to this story called Freedom from Bondage, and I'm thinking we'll be doing that next week, where it's really going to say if these other treatments, and she actually says it in the story, my treatment of resentment worked in everybody except this one. And then she talks about it, and she talks about what she had to do to get over it. And Joe and Charlie do a really good job talking about this too, and we'll get there. But for right now, we're talking about this treating them through the four columns. And I just want you to bear in mind that when we do get to that fourth column, and particularly where we see that the other person's behavior hurts or threatens some part of ourselves, our self-esteem, our pride, our ambitions, our security, our relationships, including sex, and our financial security, our pocketbook. Once we can get to that fear, then the 10-step protocol tells us what to do. Pray at once for removal, share with somebody, make amends if called for, turn your mind to service. And we're taught that the way we turn our mind to service is to try to ask the question, God, how can I best serve thee? With regard to this situation that I'm in with so and so, where I'm resenting their behavior and I'm resenting the way it makes me feel, how can I best serve thee? That's the turn to service, and that's the turn away from our self-reliance. We're not asking our mind, what our mind tells us is resent the person. That it tells us this, just like my mind told me to drink. The resentment tells me that resent this person, they're not going to want to experience my resentment, so they're going to examine their behavior and they're going to change their mind about how they're behaving. They'll behave better. I'll be happier. We called it the three lies of resentment. I'll just review them because it can be a powerful help in terms of your experience with resentment. Line number one is, I'm unhappy, but it's not my fault, it's your fault. If you would behave differently, I could be happy. Line number two is, so I'm going to resent you. Resentment is a good way to alter your behavior so that you can be a better person and I can be happier and the world can be a better place. And line number three is the hardest one. Line number three is, I would never treat somebody the way you're treating me. I would never behave the way you're behaving. And that's actually what gives me the right to resent you, because I couldn't be that way. And then you find out in these turnarounds, particularly, wow, yeah, I treated people just the way I feel you're treating me. Um, and that's a way to undo the power of our self-reliance, of believing our own thinking. Okay, so I'm going to go into the book, and we're going to start at the bottom of page 65, and I'm just going to read through it and we'll see what happens. So at the bottom of 65, this is after the columns. And, I, I've made it my business to get comfortable with page numbers. And I can picture in my mind this page with these three columns 1 and 2 and 3, because it's so different than any other pages. And if you can remember that that's page 65, then you can remember 67, 66, 67, we're going to talk about today, is about resentment. Fear is 68 and sex conduct is 69. And you'll remember that we've talked about each of these pages, 67, 68, 69, tells us something to not do, and it tells us something to do. And this has been really important for me, and especially when you're dealing with somebody else, or you're trying to be helpful to somebody else, or you're really even trying to understand yourself. It's saying, don't do this. We're saying, don't take the first drink. Well, on page 67, it's going to say, don't engage in retaliation or argument. And resentment is retaliation and argument together. I'm arguing with somebody else's behavior and I'm trying to retaliate by sending them ill will. Don't engage in retaliation or argument. Instead, seek a kindly and tolerant view. And unfortunately, at the end of that, it says of each and every one. We don't get to leave somebody out of that. As justified as our resentment is, it says each and every one. When we get to page 68 and it's talking about fear, it's going to say we never apologize for God. Now that's going to be, we'll be talking about that. How do I apologize for God? And my feeling is, for me, every time I complain about anything, whether it's a person's behavior or the weather or the traffic, I am complaining about, I'm saying, God, this ain't right. This shouldn't be this way. This person shouldn't be behaving this way. These people shouldn't be driving so slowly. And that jerk in the left-hand lane, why can't he get over in the, that's how I apologize for my perfectionism is one of the ways that I apologize for God. And then it says, instead, wow, we let God demonstrate through us what God can do. It's a huge statement. It's saying, quit your complaining and let God demonstrate through you what God can do, which is exactly what the third step prayer says. Take away my difficulties, that my victory over these difficulties will demonstrate your power, your peace, your love, your way of life. I am to be God's agent in demonstrating this stuff in whatever situation I am. And then you get to page 69 about sex conduct, and that's really about remorse. It's about where I'm feeling badly in this moment about my behavior. It uses sex, but it can be anything. It can be emotional, it could be financial, it could be physical, any type of thing where I feel bad about the frightened and selfish person that I was in terms of another person or an institution or in my past. So I don't mean to get too far off, but what it says on 69 is we avoid judging others. We avoid judging people. We want to stay out of this controversy, is what it says. We want to avoid judging other people. And instead, for me, it's become more and more powerful of a statement. Instead, we ask God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. Any problem I have, I am convinced, is due to lack of power. I lack power. I can mentally think I ought to be a nice guy here, and I can't do it. I act like a jerk. Um, because I lack power, and I'm hung up on human power. B says no human power is going to relieve my alcoholism. I got to get, which means if lack of power is my dilemma, then I got to get power. And how do I get power? I get power through prayer and meditation and service. All the things that we do, reading spiritual literature, going to meetings, one-on-one contact with each other, and our service commitments. Okay, so any rate, I just as an overview, but we're going to dig into 67, 66 and 67, but we're trying to get this new attitude. We're trying to get out of resentment and fear and remorse. That's the attitude that we have. And that absolutely blocks us from experiencing God's peace, power, and love. This is what Frank Buckman, we talked about Buckman a couple of sessions ago. This was his brilliant, not, it wasn't brilliant, but it was his insight that led to everything that the Oxford groups do. This isn't Bill Wilson. This is Frank Buckman. He saw that his negative attitude toward his prior employers was preventing him from receiving God's love and guidance. We talk about the grace of God. What is the grace of God? Grace of God is a mental understanding of the person that God wants me to be and the power to actually be that person. I can't do that on my self-reliance. It's why one of our readings, you know, um, I think Brenda read it. just to the extent that I humbly rely on God and do as I think God would have me do, will I be enabled to experience spiritual serenity right in the midst of the human calamity. The human calamity will never stop. The drugs are stronger, the weapons are more destructive, but we're not doing anything different than we were doing 2,000, 3,000 years ago. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's getting dangerous. But I'll be able to match that calamity with serenity. And the serenity comes from, at least for me, I am understanding more and more that I was born for God's purpose by God's purpose. I have my biological creators, but I've also got my spiritual creator, the creator of my soul. I have not a clue as to how that happened, and I am not sure why I am here. And I think that's the beauty of this, of the sex conduct thing, saying, ask God to mold your ideals and help you live up to them, which is no different than step 11. Um, Praying only for knowledge of how you want me being here on planet Earth, and then I'll get the power to carry that out. All right, so I'm going to, at the bottom of 65, we went back to our lives, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. Now, some people take this to mean you do the first 3 columns on your own, and you do column 4 with your sponsor, because it's very hard for most of us to see our selfishness and our dishonesty on our own. But if you got somebody sitting outside of your human brain who can listen to you complain about whatever, and then they can say, well, seems to me, whatever, they'll have a different take on it. So some people will say that this we considered it carefully means now I'm looking at this with the help of another person who has been through this process and understands some of the traps that we're going to hit. um, the first thing apparent when we're considering this stuff carefully was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. And then totally love this state, to conclude that others were wrong. That's as far as most of us ever got. We stop. This is contempt prior to investigation at its worst. You're wrong. I'm right. End of story. We're just going to stop right there. Well, no, I'm going to resent you. I'm going to send you some ill will, and maybe you'll understand what a jerk you're being. And maybe you'll improve your life somehow. It's like me taking the first drink and deciding that'll improve my life. And then I'm down the rabbit hole once again. Remember, the spiritual appendix says such a powerful statement. Contempt prior to investigation stops all spiritual progress, period. When I judge, that's why it's so important that it's in sex conduct, we do not judge, we stay out of this controversy. We do not judge. We do not judge ourselves. We do not judge another. Instead, we ask God, show me the way of patience and tolerance and kindness and love to get me over and around my impatience, my judgmentalism, my selfishness, and my fear. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse. Now they're hitting what we're dealing with in the sex conduct inventory. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we restored ourselves. And what's our big way of dealing with remorse? Amends. When I have behaved in a way that troubles me inside, and that's the only mark. This is not theoretical. This is experiential. When I have treated somebody else in a way that bothers me within, the way we're given to overcome that is to pray for removal. That's what 6 and 7 are, and to make amends. And the beauty of amends, we hear talk about it often, You can't make amends without some conscious contact, and you can't get conscious contact without making amends. Amends is where we experience, whether it's conscious or not, where we, if we keep asking, show me the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love, and we get something, that's conscious contact. You know, I'm sure I've told you a personal story early in the program. Um, I'm experiencing financial insecurity big time. And somebody says, try the prayer for removal. And I go, what's the prayer for removal of fear? They go, look at page 68. Well, I had no idea. So I look at page 68. Down toward the bottom, it's saying, so we ask God to remove our fear and direct our attention to what God would have us be, not do, but be, which is patient, tolerant, kind, and loving. Um, so I got on my knees for the first time in a long time and said out loud, God, please remove my fear of financial implosion. I don't know what I said. Things were coming apart. And direct my attention to what you would have me be, and what I got in no uncertain terms. And I don't remember whether it was words or just a feeling. I got, my God can be kind of sarcastic. Like, well, what I got was, Jack, don't you understand? You can be the person I want you to be, and you do not have to be rich to be that person. Being patient and tolerant and kind and loving has got nothing to do with how wealthy or poor you are. And it was big for me, but the bigness for me was all of a sudden I it's like, they're not kidding. This conscious contact thing is, I mean, not only that, but the prayer was the way I do that. This, you know, I love that first reading. This is Dr. Silkworth. I urge every alcoholic to read this book through. And though perhaps you came to practice your contempt prior to investigation, concluding that where others were wrong all your life, you will stay, you will keep coming back, and you will learn how to pray. Prayer is the heart of step 11. And for me, step 11 is the heart of the whole deal. And as we've said before, we do 1 through 9 to get to 10, 11, and 12 on a daily basis. And you can break 10, 11, and 12 down to pause. The pause is step 10. Ask and listen. The asking and listening is step 11. And do is directed. Um, Shows up right before the third step prayer. Quit playing God. Pause. Take a pause. Quit playing God. Step 2, invite God in, not step 2, but 2, invite God in. 3, do as you're directed to do. One of the third step promises that just to the extent that I try to be the person God wants me to be, I'll get everything I need. It's not quite that way, but okay. So when it was remorse, then we restored ourselves. Oh, and just Joe and Charlie do this wonderful. Oh, I'm going to get to it. Okay. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. This is the avoid retaliation or argument. You know, the more the more I resent the other person, try to get them to be different than whatever they are. Life on life's terms. That means people as they show up. I've wanted other people in my life to be different all my life. And I've only had, this only has happened once, but I'm sitting in an AA meeting in the basement of a church. And for one of the first times in my life, nothing had to be any different than it was. I had no complaints about the meeting. I didn't want any, they were the same people they always are. I didn't need them to be different. It was fabulous. You know, the unfortunate part is it goes away and my critical mind reasserts itself, but it was serenity. I'm telling you, it was, nothing needed to be different than it was at that moment. Everything was okay. I want it back. um, More we fought and tried to have our way, worse matters got. And as in war, the victor only seemed to win. This is a brilliant statement. Our moments of triumph were short lived. That's my truth. I've done what my brain asked me to do. I live in a beautiful town. I'm married to a wonderful woman. I got toys. I got money in the bank, blah, blah, blah. I did everything that my mind told me to do. And I'm happy for about 5 minutes before my mind goes, yeah, yeah, I know I told you. Yeah, yeah, okay. But now this has got to be different. We need this. You cannot be happy till we get this or do that, or so and so acts differently. It is plain. Now remember, it is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. We say over and over again, this is their truth. And my job is reading their truth and turning it into a question and asking myself, is it plain to me that if my life includes deep resentment, it will lead only to futility and unhappiness? Do I understand that? And if my answer is yes, yeah, it's plain to me. Do I want to experience life differently? Do I want serenity in my life instead of restless, irritable, and discontent? And if my answer to that is yes, then the next thing is, well, then am I willing to do what they said they did to get from restless, irritable, discontent to happy, joyous, and free? If my answer is yes, then I proceed. If my answer is no, then the next question is, well, am I willing to pray for the willingness to do what they said they did? The prayer for willingness, step 6, step 8, trying to get to willingness. Do I believe that this is the truth enough to gamble that if I try this, it will get better? And then am I willing to pray for the willingness? I've talked over and over again about, for me, red light, green light works for me. It may not work for you. God, do you want me to do this writing on step 4? Green light. Well, then give me the power and the patience to do it, because I don't want to do it. But if you want me to, I think I'm going to give it a try. Do you want me resenting on somebody? Red light. Then give me the power not to resent on them. Um, and I love this, to the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? You want to squander the hours? It's, fear of waste is one. It doesn't matter whether it's time, energy, money. I don't like waste. It makes me feel bad. This is challenging me. Do I want to squander the hours that might have been worthwhile by resenting on somebody? And not only that, you turn one page to 68, it's going to say just to the extent. It's going to use that same word again. It's going to say turn just to the extent that I permit resentment and don't treat it in the way we're being told to treat it. Do I squander the hours that might have been worthwhile just to the extent that I humbly rely on God and try to be the person God wants me to be? I will experience serenity in spite of the calamity. He was, as an author, he's so brilliant. It's just both, especially these two chapters, how it works and into action, which, by the way, he wrote at the end. He wrote everything else in the book was written in the chronological order that it's presented, but he knew he had to get down to an actual process. Steps 3 and 4 are chapter 5, how it works. Steps 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. 7 steps happen in into action. And those 2 chapters were written at the end after he was all done with the other thing, because they knew he needed something more specific. And they're just brilliant. They're just brilliant. Okay. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? And with the alcoholic, and I'd like to add to this, whose only hope, he says hope, but I'm saying my only hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience. That means a relationship with God. That means prayer and meditation and service. This business of resentment is infinitely grave. Why? Because if I allow it to go on, I'm going to drink again. Because I can't handle the inner turmoil that resentment presents to me. We found that it is fatal, for when harboring such feelings, this is Buckman's realization, for when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. This is contempt prior to investigation doing its worst. The insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again because I can't handle what I'm feeling. And with us, to drink is to die. Ouch. Of course, if you're like me, you kind of want to die. Can't keep on going that way. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouts and the brainstorm are not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, just like drinking is the dubious luxury of normal drinkers. But for alcoholics, these things are poison. Okay, now we're getting to the fourth column. Now we're turning back. We turned back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. Are you prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle? Where am I being selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. They seemed to have power over us. In that state, oh, I love this, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, it doesn't matter. I mean, you can apply this to anything you want. It doesn't matter if it's the truth or it's just in here. Fancied or real had the power to kill, ruin my life. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? This is saying we lack power. We can see that I got to get out of this resentment, and we don't know how to get the power to do that. We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. We are powerless. Lack of power is our dilemma. This was our course. Now they're going to tell you what they did. And every one of these is for us to do. We realized that the people who wronged us were not questioning that they wronged us. The people who wronged us were perhaps, I don't know why he put in perhaps, spiritually sick. And I love what Joe and Charlie do with this. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way their symptoms disturbed us, they, like ourselves, if you don't have that thing circled, circle it, highlight it. Like ourselves, I am admitting I am spiritually sick. That's the first step, even though I don't know it. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. There are those words again: patience, tolerance, kindness, love. In spite of their insanity, in spite of their spiritual sickness. And there are no except it doesn't say except for somebody that's abused you. That's a tough one, I can't get there with some of the craziness in the world today. I can't, I don't feel patient, tolerant, kind, and loving. I just can't do it. Doesn't mean it's wrong. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is called the sick man prayer or the angry man prayer. This is a sick man. How can I be helpful? That's the 10th step question. How can I best serve you? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done. So what Joe and Charlie do with this, it's really wonderful. They say this was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. So we're making a shift. We've named somebody in column 1, right? And then we put their behaviors in column 2, and then we've put the way their behaviors make us feel in column 3. How what they've done makes us feel in terms of our self-esteem, our ambitions, our pride, our security in relationships, our pocketbook security, blah, blah, blah. So what Joe and Charlie say is we realize that I don't hate the person I've named in column 1. What I hate is their behaviors. I hate the way they behave in column 2. And then they say, as you work your way through this, you're shifting it. No, actually, I don't hate their behaviors. I hate the way their behaviors make me feel. Right? I mean, so I don't have to hate on them. What I have to recognize is I don't want to feel the way their behaviors make me feel. And then if I can do something about that, if I can gain the power to not feel that way, I can get over resentment, get over my contempt prior to investigation, and get on to serenity, which is going to entail me being the person my higher power wants me to be, not the person Jack wants me to be. Jack is a tyrant, I got to tell you. None of you want to live in here. It's horrible. You know, everything's got to be perfect and nobody's doing their job. And I've been miserable most of my life. And I had to drink just to keep on going. I'm a person that's going to say, if it wasn't for alcohol, I would have been gone by age 30. Okay, let's see. Here's the avoidance. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. What you can, somebody's laying in a hospital bed and dying of some form of cancer, and you're going to go in there and say, "Rah, rah, 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 you shouldn't have this cancer. You shouldn't, blah, blah, blah," and whatever. You wouldn't treat a sick person that way. Part of the big deal here is recognizing this is a disease and then understanding the treatment and then deciding to treat it. If we do, we wouldn't treat, if we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. And this line means as much to me as any line in the book. We cannot be helpful to all people, even your own children or your own parents or your own significant other or your whatever. We cannot be helpful to all people. That's a positive promise, even though it sounds negative. I have 2 children. They're in their 40s now. I'm watching them, do different things and experience pain. And I think it's the hardest thing in the world as a parent is to watch your children in pain and feel so, unfortunately, that thing about, why your family is so good at pushing your buttons? And the answer is because they installed them. That's what we do with each other when we're living in a family. We're finding out what's going to bother so and so, and we reinforce it to where all of a sudden we know how to push each other's buttons. Okay, we cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. That's another promise. They're telling me I can't get Putin. I don't know why it bothers me so much, but I can't get Putin into a kindly and tolerant view. I cannot fathom why somebody would do that. Of each and every one, referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs they have done. This is not about them. It's about me. We resolutely looked for our mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened? Now, I personally, I've been told is I usually don't do it that way. Selfish means when I'm trying to hold on to something and I don't want to share it with you. Self-seeking is when you got something I want and I'm trying to do what it takes to get it. For me, they're both, well, doesn't matter. Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. How hard is that? It's so hard, especially when you're a self-centered, selfish, self-obsessed alcoholic, making everything about me. Your behavior's about me. Me. Uh, though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. These are our character defects, a listing of character defects. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight. Okay, so I got to stop here, but I just want to go over two things that are in the study guide and just make sure you're aware of them. The first, it's a if um, the first is a two-page inventory. Let's see. That's just based on the big book, and it's I don't know if you can see this or not, but um, the left-hand page are columns 1 and 2 and 3 that come straight out of page 65, and the right-hand page is referring to our list again. These are the instructions for column 4. Where have I been with regard to the situation with blah blah blah? Where have I been selfish, dishonest, frightened? Um, so I just want to make you aware that there's this other wonderful worksheet. What's the matter with me? And this worksheet is a two-page resentment worksheet. And instead of going left to right, it's going vertically, and it's not designed for more than one. And the first page is going to say resentment inventory and a little prayer. God, please help me to see the truth about my resentments. I am resentful at, that's column 1. The cause, their behavior, that's column 2. And this doesn't, you don't need to put anything, you don't need to explain everything. You just put a few words about what bothers you about their behavior affects my. So this is some small print, but keep columns 1 and 2 in mind while writing the third column, considerations. They like to use this word consideration, which means don't let yourself answer the question right away. Let the question work on you. Look at the third column and consider the opposite of each sentence and let the inventory reveal your fears behind each of the 7 areas of self. So the 7 areas of self are self-esteem, pride, ambition, security, personal relations, sex relations, pocketbook. And in each case here, it's going to give you an idea, a definition, self-esteem, how I see or feel about myself, the role I've assigned myself. Start sentences with I am. Pride, how I think others see me or feel about me, the role I have assigned others. Start sentences with others should, no one should, others can. One of my, you can do it. I'm ready to fight with you, but don't ignore me. That's one of mine. I don't want to be ignored. And that shows up here. um, Ambition. This is the one that's a killer for me. What I want to happen here. Start sentences with I want. This is where I get hung up. Most of my resentments come down to my ambitions for the situation, the relationship, the whatever, because I usually got a pretty good idea of what I want to have happen here. And you're in the way of that. You're an obstacle to my ambitions for this situation, and therefore I wind up hating on you. Security, what I need here to be safe, to feel okay. This is huge for people. I don't feel safe in this relationship for whatever reason, either because you trigger me so bad, or I literally do not feel physically, mentally, emotionally safe. Start sentence with, I need blanky blank to be okay. Personal relations, my deep seated beliefs on how this relationship is supposed to look. Wives trust their husbands, mothers respect their sons' choices. It's real, it's pretty male. Real friends always agree with me. Sex relations, my deep seated beliefs about how real men and or real women are supposed to be. Start sentence with a real man and or a real woman. And pocketbook affects my finances. Start with no one can, should, shouldn't, others, blah, blah, blah. So the beauty of this kind of thing is that when I did this, it was multiple choice and the thing was usually all of the above. Just check. Yes. Pride, self-esteem, ambitions. This gets you into it more to where you're looking for in what way. It's other people will say, how my self-esteem is being hurt or threatened. How? And if I can get to that, I'll get closer to the fear. And the beauty of this, and I'm going to stop, so we'll do this next time. The beauty of this is if I can get to the fear, then I can pray for its removal and ask for redirection. A basic principle of prayer, according to Emmett Fox, is vague prayers bring vague results. Specific prayers bring specific results. I can pray for the removal of fear, but if I add a few words, I pray for removal of my fear that so and so is going to dominate my life forever. I'm never going to get out from under the tyranny of this other person or whatever it happens to be. The more specific you can get about the fear, then the more effective the prayer is going to be. Okay, thank you very much for being here. I really do appreciate it, and I'm going to stop this recording and we'll have some open discussion. Usually it speaks and says, oh, maybe I didn't. Try again. Oh, yeah.